We have kindly invited Isabel San Sebastián, who is a prominent journalist. She's done it all: radio, printed press, TV. She has conducted different TV sets, and every day she analyzes the economic and political environment around us. She defines herself as a free journalist who is not afraid of saying what she thinks. And with that spirit, she's going to talk to us about what we can expect from 2022 in Spain amid the moment of uncertainty. Again, tough moments facing our country, but Spain will have to face this in the upcoming years. Hopefully, she can share with us some good news. Isabel, you have the floor. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you very much indeed, Alicia. Distinguished Chairman, Secretary General, dear Alicia, it is my pleasure and also a very big responsibility to be here in front of you, prominent specialist in managing risk in difficult straits that we are facing. I'd like to show my respect and admiration for such a difficult and cumbersome task that belongs to the heroes. And I'd like to begin by a motto, a strong conviction I do share, but also a glimpse of hope. Spain is it's a great country. Spain is a country that it's a key factor in the history of the world, that doubled its size in the world and was the protagonist of the biggest globalization, the first globalization in the 16th century. It is the company that left 28 universities in Latin America, bringing the vaccine against chickenpox, and that saved thousands of lives. That by Dr. Varmis and an extraordinary woman, Isabel Zendal. You are probably familiar with that name. And they brought about the smallpox vaccine. And Spain is unprecedented in coming out of situations. And it is, again, a country that is used to dealing with poor politicians. In Mio Cid's romance, written down in the 12th century, they talked about the bad politicians they were dealing with. We are just used to dealing with these storms and coping with it. We are not, facing the best moment in our history. I always say what I think, and I am politically incorrect, and I just like to apologize beforehand if you feel offended by my comments. But in 2022, a confluence of very worrisome risks is ahead of us, amidst uncertainty and numerous threats from the healthcare sector, the supply of basic raw materials, a truck drivers' strike that was announced yesterday, and hopefully it is fading away, including the macro and microeconomic crisis, politics on the left and right hand, and the state of law and the integrity, let alone the migration crisis that are becoming tougher and tougher in between Poland and Belarus, and in the southern part of Spain. Every time Morocco shoots something from the Ceuta and Melilla. Not to mention the cybersecurity risk, which is really dispowering the law enforcement agents, keeping the public order. But this is a perfect storm, to put it differently. I'm not an expert in virology, epidemiology, neither energy sources or economy. But if I know something, it's about politics and history. And that's reason why, especially because of my large understanding of the Spanish history, I do not give up hope. In the health sector, the pandemic is here still, that has affected the Spanish economy, but not equally. The Spain that is still still open, working, up and running, active. The biggest example is it's Madrid's region is leading the Spanish recovery, which means there is a glimpse of hope. The vaccines work, as the chairman mentioned, the strong cooperation between the public and civil sector, and the anti-vaccine movement is residual in Spain, thus being much better than in other countries. The COVID-19 is not ending in 2020, 2021, let alone in 2022, but it's still making noise. And the economic threats, challenges are higher. Risks are much higher, and the situation is gloomy at the moment, even more than before. The shortage of energy is protracted, increasing different utilities prices, and the government is powerless in view of the potential outage that can happen, in my view. That cannot happen in my view, but this means that we will pay a much higher price with an unprecedented deficit, economic deficit, inflation above 5%, in Spain and even in Germany and the USA, countries that had it historically kept it low, meaning this is an uptick in interest rates. The pensions cost is unsustainable, and private saving is jeopardized in no longer deductions to the contributions to pension schemes, which is unthinkable. Debt is above 120%, unprecedentedly high. Although I'd like to mention a very important aspect. Spain is always paying its debts. We have never, ever experienced a haircut. We've never defaulted on our debt before and after being a member of the European Union. We are a very serious country. Personally and professionally, people work and pay their mortgage loans. Nationally and personally, we are a very serious country. Therefore, our creditors can rest at peace, and therefore growth is way below the initial expectations in around 2%, and the very prestigious national and international bodies have stated this. That means that the general budgets of the Spanish state will be approved soon, that are based in a major failure and a great lie and fiction.
Porque el gobierno.
Undoubtedly, the price to be paid is going to be high by the government in economic terms, in dignity terms, and in sovereignty terms. And this sovereignty does not belong to the government alone, but to all the Spaniards. I apologize for the somber outlook, but it doesn't end here. This is a period of scarcity, and it's even crazier because we need to pay the pensions, where we haven't applied the European defined criteria, and we have to also pay the votes of the parliamentary associates, and also have to pay for the public labor that grows above private labor. Also, social contributions are going to increase, which will translate into greater crisis for the small and medium companies, and less cash in for the government. So there will be an impoverishment and less purchase capacity. This is a somber outlook, a somber forecast, and I apologize for that, but this is the way I see it. And so we are therefore in a vicious circle. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I see today. And the more media-prone debates, such as the labor market reform, are just pure noise, I think. The reform will go ahead because Podemos and the Socialist Party do not want to break up the government and do not want to risk losing European funding. And the employers do not want to lose out on that money they are waiting for. They are so looking forward to. And so the reform will be less radical than the one Podemos calls for, but a bit wider than what the European associates call for. The tension among all these parties will increase nevertheless, but it will not get to a total fallout, I don't think. arranged marriages are the more lasting in politics, and this arranged marriage between the Socialist Party and Podemos is a very interest-linked one. The interest in staying in power, I mean. And I think that's a really powerful link that will make them stay together. Having said all that, we reached the conclusion that with this government and its policies, there are no realistic expectations of coming out of our problems in the coming year. Unfortunately, here we don't have a Mario Draghi at the helm, but rather somebody called Pedro Sanchez. But of course, the good news is that our neighbors in Italy went through a L'Olivo, Forza Italia, Beppe Grillo, who was a bit of a clown, and I don't mean this in any offensive way. He used to be a clown, Beppe Grillo. And so they went through all that. They went through that terrible chicken pox, and, then they have Mario Draghi. Perhaps we will find out Mario Draghi somewhere further down the line in the future. And yet, what remains and will remain in 2022, it's a strangling in economic terms, similar to what we are experiencing now, and increasing political tension. And the centrifugal movement promoted by the independent prone and independent favorable forces really pushing forward. We're talking about a Bildu situation. This is a party that has inherited the views of terrorist groups and has never apologized for that. It belongs to movements that are totally opposite to our constitution and the spirit of what we stand for as a nation. This is unprecedented in democracy. So where's the hope to be found? And there is hope. Well, I position it first in the young generations, those who make the most noise, who are on television all the time, are the ones that are less productive. But I have children, and I know, and I see you all here, and you probably all know that most our young people are hardworking people who have studied a lot and prepared their professional future and want to just focus on organizing their lives and raising their own kids. And of course, our hope is them and is Europe. Spain is a great nation, unequivocally pro-Europe. And Rosa Perez said that Spain is not only Europe, but it's the only country in Europe that for 8 centuries fought for that right. Spain cannot be understood without Europe and vice versa. Since the 9th century, with the Santiago trail being created, the Camino de Santiago, we've been linked to Europe, linked to progress and civilization in the West. In contemporary terms, this translates into democracy, freedom, and well-being. This is why it is essential to fight any Europhobia, I believe. We need to fight any ideology that goes against Europe, be it to the left or to the right. Europe is not perfect. The European Union has its problems, its issues, its vacuums, of course, but Europe is the best thing that's happened to this continent since the fall of the Roman Empire. It has kept us from crisis, from wars. It has brought unity, which is so important to face the big problems we face, and also it has brought prosperity. And Europe, is going to help us with 27 billion euros transferred this year, or a forecast for this year, for 2022, that is. And this will be transferred with the conditions that could be our life savior, because of the quantity of the money and the conditions. This 27 billion might be a cut or be slightly late, but nevertheless, they'll bring more than just money, because Europe not only will safeguard the stability of our shared currency, the euro, but also it'll come with conditions that would imply budget discipline, which will, in the end, be abidden by, I'm sure. And also because Europe will entail guarantees of the democratic system that guarantees our freedoms framework, which is seriously under threat today. I cannot go on. I don't have the time for that. Let me just give, by way of example, how since the beginning of this government's mandate has wanted to submit the third party, the judiciary. 2 out of the 3 main judges associations went to Europe seeking help, and they got that help. And so they are resistant, they are remaining independent to a greater extent thanks to the support of the European Union. Today at Congress they are voting some shenanigans where they are, Socialist and Popular Party just, splitting the number of judges. They kind of point to one of our main, the Constitutional Court. But nevertheless, the judges remain independent thanks to the guarantees by the European Union. And this is all cause for hope. The European Union is protecting and shielding the rule of law in our country, and guaranteeing the independence of the judiciary and guaranteeing the independence of some media and some journalists who will not be silent or bought. And so those are the 2 groups, the judiciary and journalists, that are protected by our European associates. And of course, there are gaps, but in what's essential, it works. I also want to mention the King Philip VI, who in October 2017, when there was an attempted sedition in Spain, played a significant role. He is the top guarantor of the Constitution and democracy. And when he had to act, he did, taking with him thousands of and hundreds of thousands of Spaniards. I am sure he will do that again if needed. And I insist, I also want to mention the young people. They are a hope. But let's go back to the funds, which are of the essence. The reforms Europe calls for in exchange of those 27 billion euro that the government desperately needs in order to be able to survive this crisis are not compatible with the policies agreed with the communist associate. You know those conditions and you know those policies, so I will not go on about that. But European conditions are basically budget stability, financial stability, containing deficit, containing debt, a reform of the pension system that makes it sustainable, and so on and so forth. And you know it very well. You know a lot more than me about economics, and what has been agreed with a communist associate is just crazy spending restrictions to corporate action, nationalization of companies that were happily privatized a long time ago, and so on. So what is Sanchez going to do at this crossroads? At the beginning, what he's been doing for some time, which is gaining time, just deceiving and wasting time and faffing about and beating about the bush with things such as the labor market reform and the pension reform being pushed back. But from Europe, he's being told a couple of times that he needs to get his act together. In Germany, there is a financial minister that is going to really restrict the funding flow, and so he cannot go on wasting time forever, our president, that is. And when he cannot do that anymore, in my opinion, he'll just obey and do what Europe says, just as Zapatero did back in the day. Why? Because he desperately needs that money to stay in power, which is his top priority. In the first half of 2022 in Spain, we'll have a NATO conference where he wants to shine as the host, of course, and for that he needs to get along with his associates and his partners. He would love to get to the second half of 2023 to be president during those 6 months of the European Union, but in my opinion, that is very unlikely. It is not impossible, but it is unlikely. All these, I'm telling you, are just guesstimates. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. But nevertheless, I'm going to dare, foretell a few things. And perhaps I'll come back this year and have to apologize for deceiving you. I'm a crazy or a brave person. Call me what you may. Will there be a breach in the government in 2022? I don't think so. PSOE and Podemos, the two parties are not interested in that, and the pro-independence associates do not want that. With a center-right government, they would do worse. They know that, and so they don't want this government to collapse. So it'll stay, it'll remain. There will be tensions within this coalition because the socialist wants to kill politically Podemos, and Yolanda Díaz, the vice president appointed by Pablo Iglesias, is interested in controlling everything that is to the left of the Socialist Party, even part of the Socialist Party. And that is going to generate tensions and frictions, but it will not come to anything in the end because both are interested in remaining in power. There will be noise among parliamentary associates, of course. That so-called dialogue table, which is something else, choose your terminology, but it's a dialogue with a pro-independence, pro-separatist, pro-coup d'etat. This is a severe democracy anomaly. It will generate noise, but it will not go beyond that, generating headlines. There will be terrorists that come out of jail with the ensuing humiliation for the victims. And the European Commission has come in situ to verify what's happening, but that will continue to happen, and nothing will come out of it. So Frankenstein will remain alive despite its monstrosity by nature. This is a creature that the right did not name, but rather the defunct Alfredo Pérez Rubalcaba, who was a Socialist Party member, and he called it Frankenstein himself. Will there be elections? Yeah, in several regions. In Andalusia, where if we go by the surveys and the studies, we'll see what happens and how that translates into a government coalition of the Popular Party and Vox. In Castilla-León, it is very likely that the PEP, the Popular Party, will win. In Valencia, probably the left will win again, and in Aragon, given the frail health of the incumbent president, there will be elections. All of this perhaps before the funds get here. We'll see the impact of that financial scarcity in the electoral results. There will be general elections. Well, according to my own crystal ball, I don't think so. It would be quite a surprise. The studies are now giving the win to the right, which is the best reason for the elections not to be convened. But of course, that advantage is reducing every day. And if there was a flip, there was a time when the studies would anticipate that the left would win again, then they would call the elections, and they might probably call them before they get to the end of their mandate. So it depends on the studies. The advantage is reducing right now, as I always say, the advantage of the right as a consequence of the internal fights between the Madrid president and the national president. Don't ask me why. I think this is a suicide unless they are thinking about a grosse coalition like the German one, which I don't think is the case. My sources are telling me it's not the case, but stranger things have been seen, so everything's possible. Nevertheless, in my opinion, absolute majorities are a thing of the past, and we are moving towards coalition governments, left and right, for a long time. And let me just wrap it up, because time is gold, yours particularly, and Alicia is already telling me we are late. So let me just wrap it up. As I said at the beginning, Spain is a great country, a country that always pays its dues and abides by its commitments. Do not forget that. Spain is much more than its governments or its politicians. It's company, corporate people, entrepreneurs, chefs, fashion designers, great professionals in all walks of life, and including men and women in it. Spain is used to falling and raising up. In 711, it came out of Covadonga. Our president knows because he's from Asturias. It came out in 1978 of dictatorship with an exemplary transition. We raised ourselves out of the 2008 crisis, and we will raise ourselves out of this crisis. As history tells us, we are able of doing this, and we'll do it together. And if we cannot do it together, we'll do it anyhow, because we are a great nation, thanks to people such as yourselves, who believe in this nation, who make efforts and take risks because they believe in their nation. Thank you.